I was fixing a loose cabinet hinge in our kitchen when I heard Rachel sobbing in the living room. Not the quiet sniffling she did during those insurance commercials with the sad dogs, but real tears, the kind that come from somewhere deep and raw. "Everything okay in there?" I called out, though I kept working on the hinge. After 12 years of marriage, you learn when to push and when to let sleeping problems lie. "Fine," she choked out, which was Rachel speak for absolutely not fine, but don't you dare ask again. I set down my screwdriver and walked to the doorway. She was curled up on our couch, her phone clutched against her chest like a lifeline, mascara streaking down her cheeks in dark rivers. The glow from her screen lit up her face in that sickly blue way that made everyone look like a corpse. "Bad news from work?" I tried, settling into my recliner across from her. She shook her head, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Just social media stuff. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was, actually. I'd given up Facebook years ago when it became clear that everyone I went to high school with had either become a pyramid scheme salesperson or a political expert. But Rachel lived on that thing, scrolling through other people's highlight reels like it was her job. "Want to talk about it?" "No." She sat up straighter, composing herself with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent years in corporate HR. "It's nothing important." But it was important enough to make her cry like someone had taken a sledgehammer to her heart. I watched her wipe away the last of her tears and head upstairs, phone still glued to her palm. The floorboards creaked overhead as she moved around our bedroom, probably changing into her pajamas, even though it was only 8:30. I went back to the cabinet hinge, but my mind wasn't on the screws anymore. In 12 years, I'd seen Rachel cry maybe a dozen times. When her grandmother passed, when she got passed over for that promotion 3 years ago, when our neighbor's cat got hit by a car. Each time she'd told me exactly what was wrong and exactly how I could help fix it, or at least make it better. This felt different. This felt like a secret. The next morning, Rachel was already gone when I woke up. She usually left me a note on the kitchen counter, reminders about dinner plans or requests to pick up groceries, but today there was nothing except a coffee mug in the sink and the faint smell of her perfume lingering in the air. I poured myself coffee from the pot she'd made and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my foreman, Danny, probably wondering why I wasn't already at the construction site. We were behind schedule on a commercial renovation downtown, and every day we lost meant money out of everyone's pockets. But something nagged at me as I grabbed my work boots from the mudroom. Rachel had been acting strange for weeks now, distracted during conversations, protective of her phone, staying up late scrolling through social media with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I'd chalked it up to work stress or maybe early midlife crisis stuff, but last night's tears felt like a missing puzzle piece clicking into place. I was halfway to my truck when I realized I'd forgotten my safety glasses. Back inside, I headed upstairs to grab them from the nightstand. That's when I saw Rachel's laptop sitting open on her side of the bed, screen still glowing. I shouldn't have looked. 12 years of marriage had taught me that privacy was sacred, that trust was everything, that looking through your spouse's personal stuff was a one-way ticket to relationship disaster. But something about her tears the night before, about the way she'd clutched that phone like it contained the secrets of the universe, made me pause. The Facebook page was still open, and there, pinned to the top of her news feed with a little heart emoji she'd left in the comments, was an engagement announcement. "Benjamin Torres is engaged to Ava Martinelli. Can't wait to marry my best friend and the love of my life this September in beautiful Cape Cod. Benjamin Torres." Ben, Rachel's college boyfriend, the one she'd dated for 3 years before we met, the one she'd described as the one that got away during one of our early dating conversations, before catching herself and assuring me that everything happened for a reason and she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The photo showed a good-looking guy with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines around his eyes, down on one knee in front of a gorgeous brunette woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. They were on a beach somewhere tropical, sunset painting everything golden and perfect behind them. I scrolled down through Rachel's comment history. She'd been busy. "Congratulations! So happy for you both. Ava is absolutely beautiful. You two are perfect together. September weddings are magical. Where's the ceremony?" And then, buried deeper in the thread where most people wouldn't bother to scroll, "Remember when we talked about getting married on the beach? Looks like you finally found the right person to do it with." My stomach twisted. I scrolled back up to check the timestamp on the original post. Yesterday, 6:47 p.m., right around the time Rachel had started crying in our living room. I closed the laptop and grabbed my safety glasses, but my hands were shaking. Outside, I sat in my truck for a full 5 minutes, staring at our house. The house we'd bought together, renovated together, filled with 12 years of shared memories and inside jokes and quiet Sunday mornings. The house where my wife had spent last night crying over another man's engagement. My phone buzzed with another call from Danny. I started the engine and pulled out of our driveway, but I couldn't shake the image of that beach photo, or the way Rachel had looked at her phone like it held all the answers to questions she'd never asked out loud. At the job site, I threw myself into physical labor with the kind of intensity that made my crew give me weird looks. We were gutting the interior of an old department store, turning it into trendy loft apartments for people who thought exposed brick and industrial lighting were worth paying double rent for. Perfect work for a day when I wanted to tear something apart with my bare hands. "You okay, boss?" Marty asked during our lunch break. He was my second in command, a guy who'd been doing construction since before I was born and had developed an uncanny ability to read people's moods. "You look like someone stole your lunch money." "Just thinking," I said, unwrapping the sandwich Rachel had made me the night before. Turkey and Swiss on wheat bread, cut diagonally the way I liked it, with a little note tucked inside that said, "Have a great day. Love you." The note felt like evidence of something now, though I couldn't quite put my finger on what. "Dangerous habit thinking," Marty said with a grin. "Gets you in trouble every time." He had no idea how right he was. That evening, Rachel was already home when I walked through the door, standing at the kitchen counter with her phone in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. She'd changed out of her work clothes into yoga pants and an oversized sweater that made her look younger, more vulnerable. "How was your day?" she asked, without looking up from her screen. "Same old, tearing down walls, making noise, trying not to get crushed by falling debris. You?" "Meetings, paperwork, the usual excitement." She finally glanced up at me, and I searched her face for any sign of the tears from the night before. But she'd rebuilt her walls with the same efficiency she brought to everything else. "I was thinking we could order Thai food tonight. I don't really feel like cooking." "Sounds good." I opened the refrigerator and grabbed a beer, using the motion to glance over at her phone screen. She angled it away from me, but not before I caught a glimpse of the same Facebook page from that morning. "Anything interesting happening on social media?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Not really, just the usual stuff. People's vacation photos, baby pictures, you know." She took a sip of her wine and set the phone face down on the counter. "Actually, I was thinking, maybe we should plan a trip somewhere. It's been a while since we did anything fun together." "Where were you thinking?" "I don't know. Maybe the coast? Cape Cod is supposed to be beautiful in September." Cape Cod, where Ben Torres was getting married in September. I took a long drink of my beer and studied my wife's face. She was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, hopeful, maybe, or testing. Like she was waiting to see how I'd react to the suggestion. "Cape Cod sounds expensive," I said finally. "Especially in September. That's peak tourist season." Something flickered across her features. Disappointment, maybe, or frustration. "We can afford it, Elliot. We both work hard. We deserve a nice vacation." I'm not saying we can't afford it. I'm just saying there are probably cheaper places to go if we want to see the ocean. Maine has beaches too. She picked up her phone again, scrolling through something with more focus than any social media post deserved. Maine beaches are rocky and cold. Cape Cod has those beautiful sandy beaches and all that history and great restaurants. You've been researching this? What? No, everyone knows about Cape Cod, it's famous. But the way she said it, the slight hesitation before the denial, told me she was lying. Rachel had been researching Cape Cod the same way she researched everything else that mattered to her, obsessively, thoroughly, with the attention to detail that made her so good at her job and so dangerous when she wanted something. We ordered Thai food and ate it while watching a cooking show on the Food Network, making small talk about work and weekend plans, and whether we needed to call someone to look at the weird noise the dishwasher had been making. Normal married couple conversation, comfortable and familiar and completely surface level. But underneath it all, I kept thinking about that engagement photo, about Rachel's tears, about her sudden interest in Cape Cod vacations. And I kept watching her face, looking for cracks in the facade, for some sign of what was really going on in her head. After dinner, she disappeared upstairs with her laptop, claiming she had work emails to catch up on. I stayed downstairs, flipping through channels and trying to convince myself I was being paranoid, that I was reading too much into a few coincidences and a moment of emotional vulnerability. But around 11 o'clock, when I went upstairs to brush my teeth, I could hear her through our bedroom door. She was on the phone with someone, her voice low and intense. I know it's crazy, but I can't stop thinking about it. No, Elliot doesn't know. I just feel like there's so much I never said, So much unfinished business. I stood in the hallway, toothbrush in hand, listening to my wife pour her heart out to someone about unfinished business with a man who wasn't me. The conversation went on for another 10 minutes, but I couldn't make out most of the words through the door. Just the tone, wistful, regretful, alive in a way I hadn't heard from her in years. When she finally hung up and I heard her moving around the bedroom, I quickly ducked into the bathroom and started brushing my teeth. By the time she came in to wash her face, I was already rinsing and spitting like I'd been there the whole time. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Nina. She's having drama with her ex-husband again. Custody stuff." Rachel squeezed face wash onto her palm and started scrubbing. "You know how she gets." Nina was Rachel's best friend from college, a woman who treated relationship drama like a competitive sport. It was a plausible explanation, except for the fact that Nina had been happily remarried for 5 years and her custody battles were ancient history. Another lie. They were starting to pile up like evidence in a case I didn't want to be building. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Rachel slept beside me. She'd taken a melatonin and was out cold within minutes, but my brain wouldn't shut off. I kept replaying the day's discoveries, trying to piece together a story that made sense. My wife had cried over her ex-boyfriend's engagement. She'd been researching Cape Cod, where his wedding was happening. She'd been having secretive phone conversations about unfinished business, and she'd lied to me about all of it. The question was, what was she planning to do about it? I turned onto my side and watched her sleep, studying the face I'd been looking at for 12 years. Even unconscious, she looked troubled, her forehead creased with worry lines that hadn't been there when we'd first met. We'd been happy then, hadn't we? Or at least I'd thought we were. But maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe Rachel had been settling all along, making do with second choice while she waited for something better to come along. Maybe I'd been the placeholder husband, the safe option while she figured out what she really wanted. The thought made my chest tight with something that felt like panic mixed with rage. I'd built my entire adult life around this woman, around our marriage, around the assumption that we were in this together for the long haul. The idea that she might be planning to throw it all away for a chance with some guy from her past made me feel like the ground was shifting underneath me. I must have finally dozed off sometime after 3, because the next thing I knew, my alarm was going off and Rachel was already gone. Another morning, another empty coffee mug in the sink, another day of pretending everything was normal while my world quietly came apart at the seams. But this time, I wasn't going to just wonder and worry. This time, I was going to find out exactly what my wife was planning. And then I was going to figure out what to do about it. The next few days passed in a haze of careful observation and growing dread. I started paying attention to things I'd been ignoring for months. The way Rachel guarded her phone like state secrets, how she'd developed sudden interests in wedding planning shows and destination venue websites, the way she'd go quiet and distant whenever certain songs came on the radio. Love songs, mostly. The kind of sappy stuff we used to make fun of together, back when we were young and cynical and thought we were above that kind of romantic nonsense. I became a detective in my own home, looking for clues in browser history and credit card statements, and the way she'd pause when certain names came up in conversation. It felt like a violation of everything we'd built together, but I couldn't stop myself. The need to know was eating me alive from the inside. On Thursday morning, I found my first real piece of evidence. Rachel had left her laptop open again, and this time it wasn't just Facebook. She had multiple tabs open: wedding planning websites, travel booking sites, and something called The Knot that seemed to be entirely devoted to other people's weddings. But it was the email tab that made my hands shake. She'd been writing to Ben Torres, not just congratulations on his engagement, but long, rambling messages that read like love letters to a life she'd never lived. "I keep thinking about that weekend we spent in Provincetown senior year," one message began. "Do you remember how we talked about having a beach wedding someday? How we picked out the perfect spot on the dunes and planned the whole thing, right down to the music we'd play for our first dance?" I scrolled down, my stomach churning with each paragraph. I know it's probably crazy to bring this up now when you're so happy with Ava, but I can't stop wondering what would have happened if we'd tried harder to make it work after graduation. If I hadn't been so scared of taking risks, of following you to California like you wanted me to. The messages went on for pages, Rachel pouring out 20 years of what-ifs and regrets, painting a picture of a perfect relationship that had been destroyed by bad timing and young people's fears. She wrote about dreams they'd shared, plans they'd made, a future that had seemed so certain until real life got in the way. And then, at the bottom of the most recent message, the part that made my chest feel like it was caving in. "I know this is selfish, but I need to see you again. I need to know if what we had was as real as I remember it being. Your wedding is in 3 weeks, and after that, it'll be too late for us forever. But right now, there's still time to figure out if we're making a mistake." The message was dated yesterday. She'd written it while I was at work, probably sitting in the same kitchen where she made my lunch every morning, using the laptop I'd helped her pick out for her birthday 2 years ago. I scrolled back up to check Ben's responses. There were only a few, and they were careful, diplomatic. The kind of messages you'd write if you were trying to be kind to an ex without encouraging them. "Rachel, it's great to hear from you, but I'm not sure this is appropriate. Ava and I are very happy together, and I'm committed to building a life with her. I understand you're going through something difficult right now, but I can't be the person you work through it with. Maybe you should talk to a counselor or a close friend. Please don't contact me again. I wish you the best, but this has to stop." But Rachel hadn't stopped. Her messages kept coming, getting more desperate and more detailed with each attempt. She'd started including photos, pictures of them from college, screenshots of old text conversations she'd apparently saved for 20 years, even a photo of a ring she claimed he'd once promised to buy her. It was like watching someone have a complete breakdown in slow motion, and I was seeing it all through the cold, clinical lens of an email thread. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly closed the laptop, my heart hammering against my ribs. Rachel appeared in the bedroom doorway a moment later, dressed for work, but moving with the careful precision of someone who'd had too much wine the night before. "You're going to be late," she said, glancing at the clock on her nightstand. "Yeah, I know. Just grabbing my phone charger. I unplugged it from the wall and wrapped the cord around my hand, trying to look casual. You okay? You look tired. I'm fine. Just didn't sleep well. She moved to her dresser and started applying makeup with the mechanical efficiency of someone going through the motions. I might be a little late tonight. Nina wants to grab drinks after work. Nina again, the convenient excuse for everything Rachel didn't want to explain. Tell her I said hi, I said, and headed for the door. Elliot? Her voice stopped me in the hallway. When I turned back, she was looking at me in the mirror, her reflection framed by the photos we'd taken on various vacations over the years. Smiling couples shots from beaches and mountains and cities we'd explored together, back when we'd still believed in forever. Yeah? Do you ever think about the road not taken? About how different things might have been if we'd made different choices? The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. She was asking about Ben, about the life she'd convinced herself she should have had, about whether the 12 years we'd spent together had been worth it. Sometimes, I said, because it was true. Everyone wondered about alternate versions of their life sometimes. But then I remember that all those choices led me to exactly where I'm supposed to be. Something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or disappointment that I wasn't having the same crisis she was having. Right, of course. Why do you ask? No reason, just thinking about stuff. She turned back to the mirror and started applying mascara with sharp, angry strokes. You should go. Danny's probably wondering where you are. I left for work, but I couldn't concentrate on anything. The drive felt longer than usual, every stoplight an excuse for my mind to spiral. We were installing drywall in the apartment units, mindless physical labor that usually helped clear my head, the kind of repetitive motion that let thoughts settle into the background, but today, every hammer blow felt like it was echoing the rhythm of my racing thoughts, each thud syncing with a new realization I didn't want to face. Rachel was planning something. That much had become impossible to ignore. The emails I'd half seen over her shoulder, the sudden deep dives into travel research, the way Cape Cod kept coming up in casual conversation, it all pointed to the same inevitable conclusion. She wasn't just reminiscing. She wasn't just curious. She was actively moving toward something. She was going to Ben's wedding. The question wasn't whether she'd show up. It was how. Whether she intended to sit quietly in the back pew like a ghost from the past, or whether she was going as someone with more dramatic intentions, someone who believed she still had a role to play in a story that had already ended. During my lunch break, I sat alone in my truck and stared at my phone for a long time before finally dialing Nina's office. I told myself I was just confirming plans, just being polite. Deep down, I already knew what I was going to find. Corporate Solutions, this is Nina speaking. Hey Nina, it's Elliot, Rachel's husband. There was a pause, short but noticeable. Oh, hi Elliot. Is everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine, I said, forcing a casual tone that felt foreign in my own mouth. I was just wondering if you and Rachel had plans tonight. She mentioned drinks, but I wanted to make sure I had the timing right for dinner. Another pause. Longer this time. The kind that speaks volumes. Tonight? No, I don't think we have plans tonight. I mean, we talked about getting together sometime this week, but we didn't nail down a specific day. My stomach dropped, the way it does when a fear turns into confirmation. Oh, maybe I misunderstood. You know how it is. Yeah, totally. Tell Rachel to call me though, okay? We definitely need to catch up soon. I hung up and stared at my phone, the screen reflecting my own expression back at me. Another lie. Clean. Effortless. Rachel was going somewhere tonight, but it wasn't drinks with Nina, and whatever it was, she hadn't wanted me to know. The afternoon crawled by like a prison sentence. Time stretched and warped. I found myself making mistakes I hadn't made since my first year on the job. measuring twice and cutting wrong, dropping tools, losing track of conversations mid-sentence. The guys noticed. Marty finally pulled me aside around 3 o'clock, wiping dust from his hands. "Okay, what's going on with you? You're acting like someone who just found out his lottery ticket was a day expired." I almost laughed at how close to the truth that analogy was. "Just having some personal stuff at home? Wife stuff?" "Yeah." Marty nodded knowingly. He'd been married and divorced twice, and he carried the kind of hard-earned wisdom that comes from making every possible relationship mistake, at least once. "You want some advice from someone who's been there?" "Sure. Whatever you think she's doing, she's probably doing it. And whatever you're planning to do about it, sleep on it first. The first plan is usually the one that gets you in the most trouble." He clapped me on the shoulder and went back to work, leaving me alone with the uncomfortable truth of what he'd said. I did think Rachel was doing something reckless, something irreversible, and I was definitely planning to do something about it. I just wasn't sure what yet. That evening I got home before Rachel and used the time to do some research of my own. The house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. If she could use our shared laptop to plan whatever she was planning, I could use it to figure out what that was. It didn't feel like spying. It felt like self-preservation. Her browser history was a roadmap of obsession. Wedding venues in Cape Cod, flight schedules to Boston, hotel bookings in Provincetown, page after page, search after search, all circling the same event. She'd even looked up the specific church where Ben and Ava were getting married, a historic chapel right on the water that looked like something out of a fairy tale. The kind of place people chose because they believed in beginnings. But it was the forum posts that really scared me. She'd been active on wedding planning message boards, posting anonymously but asking very specific questions about wedding etiquette and protocol. Questions that had nothing to do with planning a wedding and everything to do with disrupting one. Questions like, what's the appropriate way to object during a wedding ceremony? And, how do you contact a bride if you have important information she needs to know about her fiancé? The responses from other users ranged from helpful to horrified. Some told her to stay away. Others warned her about legal consequences. A few encouraged the fantasy, feeding into the idea that dramatic revelations belonged in real life the way they did in movies. Rachel had kept pushing, getting more detailed with each post, refining her story. She'd created an entire narrative where she was the concerned friend, the reluctant truth-teller, the only person brave enough to save poor Ava from making a terrible mistake. In that story, Rachel wasn't the villain. She was the hero. It was delusional. It was manipulative. And it was going to destroy not just Ben and Ava's wedding, but any chance Rachel and I had of salvaging our marriage. I was still reading when I heard her car in the driveway. The sound snapped me back into my body. I quickly closed the browser and moved to the kitchen, heart pounding, trying to look like I'd been making dinner instead of spying on my wife's digital breakdown. "Hey," she said, coming through the door with a shopping bag in one hand and her phone in the other. "Sorry I'm late. Nina and I lost track of time." "How is Nina?" I asked, watching her face carefully. "Good. Same old Nina, you know. Still dramatic about everything." She set the shopping bag on the counter and started unpacking what looked like travel-sized toiletries and a new dress still in its packaging. I picked up a few things while I was out. There was a sale. The dress was navy blue with small white flowers, the kind of thing you'd wear to a summer wedding if you wanted to look appropriate but memorable. The toiletries were the travel sizes you'd pack for a weekend trip. "Going somewhere?" I asked. She froze for just a second, her hand still on the dress. "What?" "No, I just liked it. And you know how I am about buying toiletries when they're on sale. We can always use backups." But the toiletries weren't backups. They were brands she'd never used before, the kind of premium products you'd buy for a special occasion when you wanted to look and feel your best. "The dress is nice," I said. "Very summery." "Thanks. I thought it would be good for work events or whatever." She folded it carefully and put it back in the bag. I'm going to take a shower. Long day. She disappeared upstairs, and I heard the water running a few minutes later. While she was occupied, I checked the shopping bag more carefully. Along with the dress and toiletries, there was a receipt from a lingerie store and a small jewelry box containing a pair of pearl earrings. The kind of outfit you'd put together if you wanted to make an impression on someone who used to know you very well. That night, after Rachel had taken her melatonin and fallen asleep, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. I was going to look at her phone. I'd never violated her privacy like that before. In 12 years of marriage, we'd maintained a policy of trust and respect when it came to personal communications. But 12 years of marriage had also taught me that sometimes the person you trust most in the world is the one most capable of destroying your life. Her phone was charging on her nightstand, face down but not password protected. She'd always been careless about security, using the same simple passcode for everything. Our wedding anniversary, which felt like a cruel irony under the circumstances. I carried the phone into the bathroom and closed the door, my hands shaking as I opened her text messages. The most recent conversation was with someone listed as B in her contacts. The message thread went back weeks, and reading it felt like watching a car accident in slow motion. It had started innocently enough, Rachel reaching out to congratulate Ben on his engagement, Ben responding politely. But then Rachel had started sharing memories, asking questions about his life, gradually escalating the intimacy of their conversations. Ben had tried to maintain boundaries at first, but Rachel was persistent. She'd worn him down with a combination of nostalgia, flattery, and carefully crafted vulnerability. She'd told him about feeling trapped in her marriage, about wondering if she'd settled for security instead of passion, about dreams she'd given up and regrets she couldn't shake. And slowly, carefully, Ben had started responding with more than just politeness. I think about our time together too, one message read, especially lately with the wedding coming up. It's natural to wonder about the path not taken. Ava is wonderful, but she's nothing like you. Sometimes I wonder if that's good or bad. I wish things had ended differently between us. I wish we'd had more time to figure it out. They weren't planning an affair exactly, but they were dancing around the edges of one. Rachel had been slowly, methodically breaking down his defenses, and Ben had been letting her do it. The most recent messages were from earlier that evening, while Rachel had supposedly been having drinks with Nina. Rachel, I keep thinking about your wedding, about how final it all is. Once you say those vows, there's no going back. Ben, that's kind of the point of marriage, Rachel. Rachel, but what if you're making a mistake? What if we never gave ourselves a real chance? Ben, we were kids. We're different people now. Rachel, are we though? When I close my eyes, I still feel like that girl who was so crazy about you she couldn't think straight. Don't you feel it too? A long pause, then. Sometimes. But feeling something doesn't mean we should act on it. Rachel, what if I came to see you, just to talk, just to get some closure before you get married? Ben, Rachel, I don't think that's a good idea. Rachel, I'm coming to Cape Cod next weekend anyway, for work. Maybe we could just grab coffee, as friends. Another pause. I don't know. Let me think about it. Rachel, I'll be staying at the Provincetown Inn, room 237, if you change your mind. The conversation ended there, but I could fill in the blanks. Rachel had booked a hotel room in Ben's wedding town, told him exactly where she'd be, and given him an open invitation to meet her there. She'd created the perfect setup for a romantic reunion, complete with the kind of dramatic timing that belonged in movies, not real marriages. I sat on the bathroom floor, holding my wife's phone and trying to process what I'd just learned. This wasn't just about unresolved feelings or wedding day nerves. Rachel was actively trying to sabotage Ben's marriage and destroy our own in the process. The worst part was how calculated it all was. She hadn't just decided to crash his wedding on a whim. She'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. Every lie she'd told me, every secret conversation, every mysterious shopping trip had been building toward this moment when she'd show up in Ben's life and force him to choose between his future with Ava and his past with her. I put her phone back on the nightstand and slipped back into bed, but sleep was impossible. I lay there listening to Rachel breathe, studying her face in the dim light from the street lamp outside our window, and trying to figure out who this person was that I'd been married to for 12 years. Had she always been capable of this kind of manipulation? Had I just been too trusting, too comfortable, too naive to see the signs? Or had something changed in her, some midlife crisis or emotional breakdown that had turned my wife into someone I didn't recognize? Either way, I couldn't let her destroy 2 marriages for the sake of a fantasy that existed only in her head. The question was, what was I going to do to stop her? Friday morning came too soon, and not soon enough. I'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios in my head, trying to figure out the best way to handle what I'd discovered. By the time my alarm went off, I'd made a decision that felt both completely rational and absolutely insane. I was going to contact Ava Martinelli. Rachel left for work early, claiming she had a breakfast meeting with a potential client. Another lie, probably, but I didn't bother calling her on it. I had bigger things to worry about than adding one more deception to the growing pile. After she left, I opened her laptop and found Ben's Facebook page again. It didn't take much detective work to find Ava's profile from there. She was tagged in dozens of photos, and her own page was public. She worked in marketing for a nonprofit in Boston, had a degree from Northeastern, and seemed to have the kind of active social life that came with being young and in love and planning a dream wedding. She also had a LinkedIn profile, which felt like a more appropriate way to contact someone about their fiancé's potentially unfaithful behavior than sliding into their Facebook DMs. I spent an hour crafting the message, writing and rewriting it until it struck the right balance between informative and respectful. How do you tell a complete stranger that someone from their fiancé's past is planning to sabotage their wedding? How do you explain that you're the husband of the potential saboteur without sounding like you have your own agenda? In the end, I went with straightforward honesty. Hi, Ava, I know this is unusual, but I felt you should be aware of a situation involving your upcoming wedding. My name is Elliot Kane, and my wife Rachel was in a long-term relationship with your fiancé Ben during college. She's been in contact with him recently, and I have reason to believe she's planning to attend your wedding uninvited with the intention of disrupting the ceremony. I'm attaching screenshots of some concerning communications I discovered on her devices. I'm sorry to be the bearer of this news, but I thought you deserved to know so you could take appropriate precautions. Please feel free to contact me if you need any additional information. I attached the most damning screenshots: Rachel's emails to Ben, their text conversations, and her forum posts about objecting during wedding ceremonies. It felt like a massive violation of Rachel's privacy, but she'd forfeited her right to privacy when she'd decided to blow up 2 marriages for the sake of a college romance that had ended 20 years ago. I sent the message before I could lose my nerve, then sat back and waited to see what would happen. The response came faster than I'd expected. My phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification around lunchtime while I was trying to focus on installing bathroom fixtures in one of the apartment units. Thank you for reaching out. This explains some things that have been bothering Ben lately. Could we talk on the phone? I think we need to coordinate our response to this situation. I called her during my break, stepping outside the construction site for privacy. Ava's voice was calm and professional, but I could hear the underlying tension. I appreciate you contacting me, she said after we'd exchanged basic pleasantries. Ben mentioned that an old girlfriend had been reaching out, but he downplayed how persistent she was being. These screenshots paint a very different picture. I'm sorry you have to deal with this, especially right before your wedding. It's not your fault. Your wife is an adult making her own choices. There was a pause, then, Can I ask why you decided to warn me instead of trying to stop her yourself? It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself since I'd sent that first message. Because stopping her won't solve the real problem. She needs to face the consequences of what she's doing, and you deserve to have your wedding day be about you and Ben, not about some woman who can't let go of the past. What do you think she's planning exactly? I told her about the hotel reservation, the new dress, the forum posts about wedding objections. As I talked, I could hear Ava taking notes on the other end of the line. So she's definitely planning to be there, Ava said when I finished. The question is whether she's just hoping to run into Ben around town, or if she's actually going to try to disrupt the ceremony. Based on what I've seen, I think she's hoping for a grand romantic gesture. She's convinced herself that Ben still has feelings for her, and that if she shows up at the right moment, he'll realize he's making a mistake and call off the wedding. Like something out of a romantic comedy. Exactly. Except in real life, that kind of behavior is called stalking. Ava was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was harder, more determined. What do you suggest we do about it? Well, I was thinking about that. She's planning to stay at the Provincetown Inn next weekend. She's told Ben her room number and basically invited him to meet her there. What if, instead of Ben showing up, hotel security was waiting for her? You want to have her arrested? Not arrested necessarily, just discouraged. If she shows up and finds out that Ben told you everything, that you know about her plans, that there's security watching for her at the wedding venue, it might be enough to make her realize this fantasy isn't going to play out the way she's imagining. Another pause. That's actually not a bad idea. Ben has been feeling guilty about not shutting her down more firmly, but he was trying to be kind. Maybe it's time for a more direct approach. We spent another 20 minutes working out the details. Ava would talk to Ben, show him the screenshots, and make sure he understood the full scope of what Rachel was planning. They'd contact the wedding venue and the hotel, provide photos and descriptions, and make sure security was aware of a potential disruption. And they'd coordinate their response so that when Rachel showed up expecting a romantic reunion, she'd find a very different reception waiting for her. There's one more thing, I said as we were wrapping up the call. I don't want Rachel to know I was involved in this. Not yet, anyway. I need to figure out how to handle things on my end. Of course, as far as anyone knows, Ben decided to come clean about the situation on his own. After I hung up, I felt a mixture of relief and dread. I'd set something in motion that couldn't be undone, and I had no idea how Rachel would react when her carefully laid plans fell apart. But at least I'd done something instead of just sitting back and watching her destroy multiple lives for the sake of a delusion. The rest of the workday passed in a blur. I kept checking my phone, half expecting Rachel to call and somehow know what I'd done, but there was nothing. Just the usual end-of-day text, asking if I wanted her to pick up anything from the grocery store on her way home. I texted back that we were fine, then spent the drive home trying to figure out how to act normal when nothing about this situation was normal anymore. Rachel was in an unusually good mood when I got home. She was humming while she cooked dinner, actually humming, something she hadn't done in months. She'd opened a bottle of wine and was working on her second glass, moving around the kitchen with the kind of energy that came from excitement or anticipation. "Good day?" I asked, settling at the kitchen island to watch her work. "Really good. I finalized some travel plans for next weekend, got caught up on a bunch of projects at work, and Nina and I are definitely getting together tomorrow night." She glanced over at me with a smile that looked genuine for the first time in weeks. "How was your day?" "Same old. We're making good progress on the apartments, though. Should be done ahead of schedule." "That's great. I know how much you hate running behind on projects." We fell into comfortable conversation about work and weekend plans and whether we should finally do something about the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. Normal married couple stuff, the kind of easy domestic routine we'd perfected over 12 years together. But underneath it all, I was watching her carefully. looking for signs of guilt or nervousness or any indication that she was struggling with what she was planning to do. Instead, she seemed more relaxed and happy than she'd been in months, like she'd finally made a decision that had been weighing on her and could now move forward with confidence. It was disturbing how easy it was for her to lie to my face while planning to blow up our marriage. After dinner, she disappeared upstairs to organize some things, which I assumed meant finalizing her travel preparations. I stayed downstairs, flipping through channels and trying not to think about what was going to happen when she arrived in Cape Cod, expecting a romantic reunion, and found security guards instead. Around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Ava. Ben and I talked, and we've contacted the hotel and wedding venue. Everything is set up on our end. Thank you again for the heads up." I deleted the message immediately and tried to focus on the baseball game I'd been half watching, but my mind kept wandering to next weekend. In just a few days, Rachel would board a plane to Boston, drive to Cape Cod, and walk into the most humiliating experience of her life. Part of me felt guilty about orchestrating her downfall so carefully. We'd been married for 12 years, and despite everything that had happened, I didn't take pleasure in the idea of her being hurt or embarrassed. But a bigger part of me was angry, angrier than I'd ever been about anything in my life. She'd been planning to destroy our marriage and someone else's wedding for the sake of a fantasy relationship that existed only in her head. She'd lied to me repeatedly, manipulated Ben's emotions, and convinced herself that her feelings justified any collateral damage she might cause. She deserved whatever consequences were coming her way. Saturday passed quietly. Rachel spent most of the day shopping and getting her hair done, preparing for her work trip with the kind of attention to detail she usually reserved for job interviews or important social events. She tried on 3 different outfits, asked my opinion about jewelry, and spent an hour on makeup tutorials on YouTube. Watching her get ready to seduce another woman's fiancé was surreal and heartbreaking in equal measure. That evening, while she was out with Nina, or whoever she was actually spending time with, I made a decision about what I was going to do when she got back from Cape Cod. I couldn't pretend everything was normal after what I'd discovered. I couldn't go back to our comfortable domestic routine knowing that she was capable of this level of deception and manipulation. I was going to ask her for a divorce. The decision felt both inevitable and shocking. 12 years of marriage ended because my wife couldn't let go of a college boyfriend who'd moved on with his life. But it wasn't really about Ben, I realized. It was about the fact that Rachel had been willing to destroy everything we'd built together for the sake of a fantasy, and she'd done it with a level of calculation and dishonesty that made me question everything I thought I knew about her. If she could lie to me about this, what else had she lied about over the years? If she could manipulate Ben's emotions so skillfully, how had she been manipulating mine? If she could convince herself that sabotaging someone else's wedding was justified, what other selfish decisions had she rationalized away? I didn't know who I'd been married to for 12 years, but it wasn't the person I'd thought it was. Sunday morning, Rachel was up early, double-checking her packing and printing out travel confirmations. Her flight was Monday afternoon, which meant she'd be in Cape Cod by evening, ready to begin her campaign to win back her college boyfriend. "I'll probably be pretty busy with meetings and client dinners," she said over breakfast, not quite meeting my eyes. "Don't worry if you don't hear from me much." "Sure thing. Focus on work. I'll hold down the fort here." She looked at me then, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of guilt or uncertainty cross her face. Like maybe some part of her knew what she was doing was wrong, knew that she was about to cross a line she couldn't uncross. But then she smiled and kissed me goodbye, and the moment was gone. "I love you," she said, and it sounded like an apology for something I wasn't supposed to know about yet. "Love you too," I replied, and tried not to think about how it might be the last time we said those words to each other. Monday dragged by like a prison sentence. I knew Rachel's flight schedule, knew when she'd be landing in Boston, knew approximately when she'd be checking into her hotel room and texting Ben to let him know she'd arrived. I also knew that Ben and Ava were ready for her, that hotel security had her photo and instructions to contact them if she caused any problems, that the wedding venue had been briefed on a potential disruption. All the pieces were in place. Now I just had to wait and see how it all played out. Around 7 o'clock that evening, my phone rang. Rachel's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered not answering. But curiosity won out over self-preservation. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal. "How was your flight?" "Fine. Long day of travel, you know how it is." Her voice sounded strained, like she was trying too hard to sound casual. "I'm at the hotel now, just getting settled in." "Good. Get some rest. You've got a busy week ahead of you." "Yeah, about that. I might need to extend the trip by a day or two. Some complications with the client situation." More lies. She was planning to stay through the weekend, through Ben's wedding, just in case her initial approach didn't work, and she needed more time to convince him to call off his marriage. "Whatever you need to do," I said. "Work comes first." We talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, both of us dancing around the truth of why she was really there. After I hung up, I sat in our empty house and tried to imagine what she was doing, probably texting Ben, probably getting ready to go downstairs to the hotel bar in case he decided to meet her, probably rehearsing the speech she'd planned about second chances and true love and the mistake he was about to make. I almost felt sorry for her. She had no idea what was waiting for her. But then I remembered the emails, the lies, the months of careful planning and manipulation, and the sympathy faded. Rachel had made her choice. Now she was going to live with the consequences. Tuesday morning brought the call I'd been expecting and dreading in equal measure. I was on the job site, helping Marty install kitchen cabinets in one of the apartment units, when my phone started ringing. Rachel's name on the screen, and even from a distance, I could hear the hysteria in her ringtone. "I need to take this," I told Marty, stepping outside into the morning sun. "Elliot!" Rachel's voice was shrill, panicked, barely recognizable. "Something terrible has happened. What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "No, I'm not hurt, but... God, this is so embarrassing. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding, and now Ben won't talk to me, and hotel security came to my room last night, and I don't understand what's happening." I sat down on a stack of lumber, trying to keep my voice steady. "Slow down. Start from the beginning. I texted Ben yesterday when I got to the hotel, just like we planned, but instead of meeting me, he sent this horrible message saying he'd told Ava about our conversations and that I needed to leave them alone. And then around midnight, security knocked on my door and said there had been complaints about me harassing other guests." Harassing other guests? That's what they said. They had photos of me, Elliot. Photos. Like someone had been watching me and documenting everything I did. They said if there were any more incidents, they'd have me removed from the hotel. I made appropriate shocked and confused noises while she continued her story. She'd spent most of yesterday trying to contact Ben, calling and texting and even going to his office, only to be told he wasn't available and wouldn't be taking her calls. She'd driven by his house and found extra cars in the driveway, probably wedding party members or family who'd arrived early for the festivities. "It's like someone turned him against me," she said, her voice breaking, "like someone told him lies about what I was trying to do here." "What were you trying to do there, Rachel?" The question hung in the air for a long moment. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, shallow and uneven, the sound of someone frantically weighing options. I knew that pause well by now, the hesitation that came when she was deciding how much of the truth she could safely reveal without exposing the full scope of what she'd been doing. In the past, I might have filled the silence, reassured her, given her space to shape the narrative. This time, I stayed quiet and waited. I wanted closure. I wanted to talk to him before he got married, to make sure we were both okay with how things ended between us. but now he's acting like I'm some kind of stalker, and I don't understand why. The explanation sounded rehearsed, like something she'd told herself over and over until it felt reasonable. Closure. One last conversation. Emotional loose ends. All the familiar phrases people use when they don't want to admit the real motivation underneath. Maybe he's just focused on his wedding, I said carefully. That's a stressful time for people. I could hear her exhale sharply, frustration bleeding through. No, it's more than that. Someone has been feeding him information about me, making me look bad. And I think... God, Elliot, I think someone might have hacked my email or something. Ben knew things about our conversations that I never told him directly. My stomach clenched. There it was, the first crack in her certainty. She was starting to sense that the narrative wasn't entirely under her control anymore, that someone else had access to the private world she thought belonged only to her. It was only a matter of time before she started connecting dots, before suspicion turned inward and she realized that the betrayal hadn't come from some faceless stranger. That sounds paranoid, Rachel, I said, forcing my voice to stay neutral. Maybe you should just come home and forget about this whole thing. I can't come home, not like this, she snapped, panic rising. I need to fix this situation. I need to make Ben understand that I'm not some crazy person, that I just wanted to talk to him like a normal human being. But she wasn't talking to him like a normal human being. She was inserting herself into his life at the worst possible moment, ignoring every boundary he'd tried to set, rewriting his reality to suit her own needs. She was stalking him, manipulating him, trying to destabilize his relationship for her own selfish purposes. The most frightening part was that she genuinely couldn't see it, not even now, not even with everything unraveling. Rachel, listen to me, I said more firmly. You need to leave Cape Cod today. Come home, and we'll figure this out together. I can't leave yet. The wedding is Saturday. If I can just talk to him before then, if I can just explain... Explain what? I interrupted. The restraint I'd been holding on to finally slipped. That you're in love with someone else? That our 12-year marriage means so little to you that you're willing to throw it away for a college boyfriend who's clearly not interested in rekindling anything with you? The words came out harsher than I'd intended, edged with exhaustion and disbelief. I was tired of guessing, tired of pretending, tired of acting like this was some innocent emotional detour instead of a full-blown betrayal. Rachel went silent on the other end of the line, and I could practically hear her mind racing, recalculating, trying to assess how much I actually knew. It's not like that, she said finally, her voice smaller now, defensive and brittle. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me, I said. Explain why my wife is in Cape Cod trying to break up someone else's wedding instead of being home with her husband. I'm not trying to break up their wedding, she insisted, the words tumbling out too quickly. I needed to know if what Ben and I had was real, if maybe we gave up too easily 20 years ago. And what about what you and I have? I asked quietly. Was that ever real, or was I just the consolation prize while you waited for Ben to come back into your life? That was when she broke. She started crying then, the kind of messy, desperate sobs that come when someone realizes the story they've been telling themselves can't survive contact with reality. The sounds came through the phone unfiltered, gasping breaths, muffled words, raw panic. I love you, Elliot, she said between sobs. I do. But I've been thinking about Ben for months, wondering what might have been, and when I saw that engagement announcement, it felt like my last chance to find out if we made a mistake. We didn't make a mistake, Rachel. You made a mistake. You made a mistake when you decided that your feelings were more important than our marriage vows. You made a mistake when you started lying to me and sneaking around behind my back. And you're making a mistake right now by staying in Cape Cod instead of coming home and trying to save what's left of our relationship. I can't come home yet. I need to see this through. Then you're going to see it through alone. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. Marty appeared in the doorway of the building, tool belt around his waist, looking concerned. "Everything okay out here? You look like someone just told you your truck got repossessed." "Wife trouble," I said, standing up and brushing sawdust off my pants. "The kind that gets better or the kind that gets worse?" "Definitely the kind that gets worse." He nodded knowingly. "You need to take the rest of the day off?" I thought about it. I could go home, sit in our empty house, and wait for Rachel to call back with more lies and manipulations. Or I could stay here, focus on physical labor, and try not to think about the fact that my marriage was disintegrating in real time. No, I'd rather stay busy. "Got any particularly destructive work that needs doing?" Marty grinned. "As a matter of fact, we need to demo that old bathroom on the second floor. Nothing but sledgehammers and crowbars for the next few hours." "Perfect." I spent the rest of the day taking out my frustration on bathroom tiles and drywall, swinging a sledgehammer with the kind of therapeutic violence that left me exhausted but oddly calm. By the time we packed up for the day, I'd worked through most of my anger and arrived at a kind of grim acceptance. My marriage was over. Rachel had made that choice when she decided to pursue Ben, and I'd made it when I decided to stop her. There was no going back from this point, no way to pretend that everything was fine when we both knew it wasn't. The question now was how to handle the aftermath with as much dignity as possible. That evening, I started making practical preparations for the end of my marriage. I called a lawyer, a guy named Peterson, who'd handled my buddy Dave's divorce a few years back. I made an appointment for Thursday morning, figuring Rachel would still be in Cape Cod making a fool of herself, and I could get the legal process started without having to deal with her dramatics. I also started going through our joint finances, trying to figure out what belonged to whom and what would need to be divided up. 12 years of shared assets, shared debts, shared decisions that would all need to be untangled by lawyers and mediators and court documents. It was depressing as hell, but it was also oddly liberating. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of my life instead of just reacting to Rachel's choices. Wednesday passed without any communication from Rachel, which was probably for the best. I assumed she was still in Cape Cod, still trying to figure out how to salvage her romantic fantasy, still refusing to accept that Ben had moved on with his life. Thursday morning's meeting with Peterson went better than I'd expected. He was a straightforward guy who'd seen enough messy divorces to know when someone was being reasonable and when they were being vindictive. "Based on what you're telling me, this should be relatively straightforward," he said, reviewing the financial documents I'd brought. "No kids, both of you employed, assets are pretty evenly distributed. The house might be the biggest sticking point, but even that's manageable if you're both willing to be adults about it." "What if she's not willing to be an adult about it?" Peterson leaned back in his chair and studied me over his reading glasses. "Then it gets expensive and ugly and takes twice as long as it should. But most people come to their senses once they realize how much they're spending on legal fees." I signed the initial paperwork and authorized him to start the filing process. By the end of next week, Rachel would be served with divorce papers, and our marriage would officially be coming to its irreversible end. It felt surreal and inevitable at the same time. Thursday evening, my phone rang again. Rachel's name on the screen, but this time I was ready for whatever fresh drama she'd managed to create. "Elliot, thank God you answered. I'm at the police station." "What? Why? What happened?" "They arrested me. Can you believe it? They actually arrested me for trespassing and harassment." I sat down hard on our couch, trying to process this latest development. "Start from the beginning. What did you do?" "I didn't do anything. I just went to the wedding venue to try to talk to Ben, to explain that I'm not some crazy person that I just wanted to have a conversation. But security was waiting for me, like they knew I was coming, and they called the police." "Rachel, you can't just show up at someone's private event uninvited. That's literally the definition of trespassing." "But I wasn't trying to crash the wedding. The wedding isn't until Saturday. I just wanted to see the venue, maybe run into Ben while he was doing rehearsal stuff. But they treated me like I was some kind of criminal." She was crying again, but this time the tears sounded more like self-pity than genuine remorse. She still didn't understand that her behavior was inappropriate, that she'd crossed multiple lines and violated multiple boundaries in her quest to win back a man who clearly wanted nothing to do with her. "Did they charge you with anything?" "Trespassing and harassment. They said if I come within 500 feet of Ben or Ava or any of their wedding venues, they'll arrest me again. They gave me a restraining order, Elliot. A restraining order. Maybe that's a sign that you should come home." "I can't come home like this. I can't face everyone knowing that I got arrested, that I humiliated myself like this. What are people going to think? People are going to think you had some kind of breakdown and made some bad choices, which is exactly what happened. You don't understand. Someone set me up. Someone has been sabotaging me from the beginning, feeding Ben information about me, turning him against me before I even got here. Someone wanted me to fail." She was getting closer to the truth, but she still couldn't see her own role in the disaster. In her mind, she was the victim of some elaborate conspiracy rather than the architect of her own downfall. "Rachel, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I contacted Ava Martinelli. I told her about your plans, showed her the emails and text messages you'd been sending to Ben. I'm the one who set you up." The silence that followed was so complete, I thought the call had dropped. When Rachel finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "You did what?" "I found your emails, your travel plans, your forum posts about objecting at weddings. I knew what you were planning, and I couldn't let you destroy 2 marriages for the sake of a fantasy. You went through my private communications. You violated my privacy. You betrayed me. I protected an innocent woman from having her wedding destroyed by my wife's midlife crisis. And I protected myself from being married to someone who was willing to throw away 12 years for a college boyfriend who moved on with his life 20 years ago. How could you do this to me? How could you humiliate me like this?" "I didn't humiliate you, Rachel. You humiliated yourself. I just made sure that when you did it, you were the only one who got hurt." She hung up on me then, and I sat in our quiet house, listening to the silence and waiting to feel something other than relief. But relief was exactly what I felt. For the first time in months, I wasn't wondering what Rachel was planning or worrying about what she might do next. The worst had happened. The truth was out. And now, we could all move forward with our lives. Friday morning brought a text message from Ava. "Wedding went off without a hitch. Thank you for everything. I hope you find the happiness you deserve." I smiled and deleted the message, then went to work and spent the day installing hardwood floors and trying not to think about what Rachel was doing or when she'd be coming home. Saturday evening, I got my answer. I was grilling a burger for dinner when I heard her car in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I watched her get out and retrieve her suitcase from the trunk, moving with the defeated posture of someone who'd lost everything they'd thought they wanted. She came through the front door quietly, almost tentatively, like she wasn't sure she was still welcome in her own home. "Elliot," she called out. "In the kitchen." She appeared in the doorway, and I was shocked by how different she looked after just 1 week away. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "We need to talk," she said. "Yeah, we do." I turned off the grill and followed her into the living room, where we sat on opposite ends of the couch like strangers. She looked around the room, at the photos of our various vacations, at the wedding picture on the mantel, at all the accumulated evidence of 12 years together, and started crying again. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know how I let it get so out of control." "But you did let it get out of control. You planned it, Rachel, for months. You lied to me. You manipulated Ben. You were willing to destroy his relationship and ours for the sake of something that existed only in your imagination." I know, and I hate myself for it. But I was so confused, so lost. When I saw that engagement announcement, it brought up all these feelings I thought I'd dealt with years ago. I started wondering if I'd settled, if I'd chosen security over passion, if I'd given up on my dreams too easily. And what conclusion did you come to? She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 12 years ago. Vulnerable, honest, real. That I already had everything I needed right here. That I was willing to throw away something real and good for the sake of a fantasy. That I'm an idiot who nearly destroyed the best thing in my life because I couldn't appreciate what I had. It was what I'd wanted to hear for months, but it was too little and too late. For a brief moment, some distant part of me recognized the apology I'd been waiting for, the acknowledgement, the regret, the admission of wrongdoing. But that moment passed almost as soon as it arrived. The damage was done, the trust was broken, and I couldn't unknow what I now knew about who Rachel really was when she wanted something badly enough. Once you see that side of a person, you don't get to pretend it doesn't exist. "I've filed for divorce," I said quietly. My voice sounded steadier than I felt, like it belonged to someone else who had already accepted the outcome. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Her face drained of color, her mouth opening slightly before closing again. "What?" "I met with a lawyer on Thursday. The papers should be served early next week." I didn't elaborate. There was nothing to soften here, no gentler phrasing that would change the meaning. But I just told you I was sorry. I told you I realized I made a mistake." Her words came faster now, tangled with panic. "We can fix this, can't we? We can go to counseling, we can work through this together." "No, Rachel, we can't." I took a breath, choosing clarity over kindness. "Because this isn't just about Ben or the wedding or even the lying. This is about the fact that when you wanted something, you were willing to destroy everything else to get it. This is about the fact that I don't know who I've been married to for 12 years, and I'm not sure I want to find out." She reached for my hand, desperation etched into every movement, but I pulled away. The space between us felt necessary now. "Please don't do this. Please don't throw away our marriage because I made one mistake." "One mistake?" I repeated, the disbelief sharp even without anger. "Rachel, you planned this for months. You lied to me repeatedly. You emotionally manipulated another man. You tried to sabotage someone else's wedding. You got arrested for harassment and trespassing." I shook my head slowly. This wasn't one mistake. This was a series of deliberate choices that showed me exactly who you really are. "I'm not that person," she insisted, tears spilling freely now. "I was having some kind of breakdown, some kind of crisis. People do crazy things when they're not thinking clearly." "Maybe," I said, "but they also show their true character when they think no one is watching. And your true character is someone who's willing to hurt innocent people to get what she wants." Saying it didn't feel cruel. It felt factual. We sat in silence for a long time, both of us crying, both of us mourning the end of something that had once been good and solid and real. I thought about early mornings, shared jokes, quiet nights that used to feel safe. She stared at the floor, shoulders shaking, as if replaying the same memories from a completely different angle. Finally, Rachel stood up and headed for the stairs. "I'll pack some things and stay at Nina's for a while," she said. "Give you some space to think about this." "This isn't about space, Rachel. This is about the end of our marriage." She paused at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at me one last time. Her eyes were red, swollen, searching for something I no longer had to give. "I love you, Elliot. I know I screwed everything up, but I do love you." "I know you do," I said, "but love isn't enough when trust is gone." She went upstairs, and I heard her moving around our bedroom, drawers opening and closing, hangers scraping along the closet rod. She packed clothes and toiletries and whatever else she thought she'd need for her new life as a divorced woman who'd thrown away her marriage for a fantasy. An hour later, she was gone, and I was alone in the house we'd shared for 12 years. I sat on the couch and looked around at the remnants of our life together, the photos on the walls, the furniture we'd picked out together, the quiet corners that still held echoes of conversations we'd never have again. I tried to figure out how I felt about the sudden silence, the sudden freedom, the sudden responsibility of starting over at 46. Mostly, I felt relieved. For the first time in months, I didn't have to wonder what Rachel was planning or worry about what she might do next. I didn't have to pretend everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I didn't have to live with someone who'd proven she was capable of elaborate deception when it suited her purposes. It was going to be lonely, and it was going to be expensive, and it was going to be complicated in ways I couldn't even imagine yet. But it was also going to be honest. And after everything that had happened, honesty felt like the most valuable thing in the world. I opened a beer, turned on a baseball game, and started planning the rest of my life. A life without Rachel, without lies, without the constant fear that the person I trusted most in the world was capable of destroying everything we'd built together. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined when I'd said I do 12 years ago, but it was the ending that made sense given everything that had happened since. And for the first time in months, that was enough.